My husband, Mark, is everything people think they want: successful, composed, charming. On paper, we had the dream life. We lived in a beautiful home with our 18-year-old son, Ethan, who was preparing for college. Friends called us the perfect family. But perfection is often a well-rehearsed lie. Mark had been traveling more lately. "Just another conference," he'd say, followed by a kiss on the cheek that felt more like routine than affection. His presence became less physical, and his absence stretched beyond the airport. We rarely spoke unless it was about bills, Ethan's schooling, or some shallow update about his job. At night, I slept next to a cold space and scrolled through memories of us that no longer resembled our reality. Ethan noticed. He always did. He wasn't a typical teenager. He was quiet, observant, respectful, the kind of son people envied me for. While most boys his age were out chasing distractions, he spent weekends helping me around the house, watching old movies with me, or simply sitting nearby in comfortable silence. He filled the silence Mark left behind, not with noise, but with presence. One evening, Mark called to say his flight was delayed again. I had already prepared his favorite dinner. I stared at the table set for 3, now reduced to 2. Ethan saw the disappointment on my face. He offered to stay in, even though I knew he had plans. "You shouldn't eat alone," he said with a warm smile. It felt strange how those simple words felt like more than my husband had given me in months. Over time, I began to lean on Ethan emotionally more than I should have. It wasn't intentional. It started with long talks after dinner, jokes that made me laugh for real, not the polite chuckle I gave Mark out of habit. He'd notice if I looked tired, urge me to rest, bring me tea without asking. I began to feel seen, not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman. Still, I never crossed any line, not even in thought, or so I told myself. I loved my son. I respected the boundaries life had set. But something was shifting, quietly and without warning. The house began to feel different when it was just us. Laughter lingered a little longer. Silences grew heavier. Then came that night. Mark was supposed to return. He didn't. Another excuse, another delay. The house was quiet, yet it pulsed with something I couldn't name. Ethan sat across from me at the table, his eyes locking with mine a moment too long. He didn't look away. I remember the way my breath caught. Something flickered between us, and neither of us spoke. In that moment, everything I thought I understood about love, loyalty, and lines began to blur. That night, when my husband wasn't home, what my son did next will stay with me forever. The next morning, I tried to pretend nothing had shifted. But I couldn't unsee the way Ethan looked at me the night before. It wasn't a glance from a son to a mother. It was something else, curious, restrained, intense. I caught myself remembering it more than I should have. He made breakfast before I even got out of bed. "Thought you could use a break," he said, placing the plate down without waiting for praise. It felt intimate. Not the act itself, but the way he did it. Quietly attentive. Like he knew what I needed before I asked. Mark used to be that way, years ago, before distractions and silence replaced real connection. Days passed, and the air between Ethan and me became thick with things unspoken. He started brushing against me more often, his hand lingering on my shoulder, fingers grazing mine when handing over a dish. They were innocent touches, technically, but they left echoes on my skin. I began dressing more carefully, applying perfume even when I wasn't going out. I told myself it was just habit, but part of me knew better. One evening, I was reading on the couch when he sat down beside me, closer than usual. We watched a film, but I couldn't tell you what it was about. I was hyper-aware of the space between us, which kept shrinking with each shared laugh, each accidental touch. At one point, his hand brushed my knee. Neither of us moved. I excused myself, heart racing. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter, disgusted at myself for even feeling it. But I wasn't imagining it. He felt it too. That mutual awareness, quiet but sharp. I should have said something, reset boundaries. But I didn't. I let it hang in the air like a secret neither of us wanted to name. Mark called that night. I didn't answer. I watched the phone ring, unreadable. He hadn't asked how I was in weeks, hadn't noticed the growing distance in our brief conversations. When I finally called him back the next day, he barely noticed the delay. Just another flight, another meeting. No questions. No emotion. Ethan, on the other hand, noticed everything. That night, I broke down. I didn't mean to. The weight of months, maybe years, poured out of me. He found me in the laundry room, sitting on the floor, silent tears streaming down my face.
He didn't speak.
He just sat down beside me and held me. I let him. I leaned into his chest and stayed there. Too long for comfort. Too long for denial. I kept telling myself nothing had happened. Nothing real. Just emotions filling the vacuum left by a man who had stopped being present. But I also stopped pretending that everything was okay. Ethan wasn't just a boy anymore. He wasn't just my son. Something in him had changed. And worse, I was changing too. I didn't know where this would lead. But the part that scared me most? I didn't want to stop it. Mark had been gone nearly 2 weeks. The longest stretch yet. His texts became short, more transactional than affectionate. Flight changed. Need you to pay the water bill. No questions about home. No words about missing me. I didn't push for more. I had stopped expecting it. Ethan had grown quieter too, but it wasn't the same kind of absence. It was an awareness, a tension neither of us spoke about, but both of us felt. We'd crossed paths in the hallway, our eyes locking just a second too long. Our conversations became clipped, calculated. Yet everything unsaid sat between us like a third presence. One night, after dinner, I poured a glass of wine and sat outside. He joined me, without asking. We didn't speak at first. Just sipped quietly in the dark. Then he said, "You always look sad when you're alone." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The truth was too close. I felt seen again and exposed. We started talking, really talking, about trust, about loneliness, about how it feels to be forgotten by someone who once swore they never would. I confessed things I hadn't told anyone, that I often felt invisible, that I hadn't been touched in a way that made me feel alive in years. I didn't say it to manipulate him. I said it because it was true. He looked at me and I didn't recognize him for a moment. There was no trace of a boy in his eyes. Only something raw, direct, and full of unspoken need. He reached out and touched my hand. I should have pulled away. I didn't. The silence stretched. I looked down, away, searching for the right words to stop what I knew was about to happen. But none came. Then, without a word, he leaned in. Just slightly, enough to ask a question without speaking. And for one insane moment, I didn't move. Our lips nearly touched before I found the strength to pull back. My heart was racing. I was breathless. He stared at me, eyes heavy with guilt, longing, confusion. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You deserve more than this. Someone who's actually here." I told him to go to bed. My voice trembled, but I managed it. He obeyed, slowly, but didn't say another word. As soon as he left, I collapsed into my hands, disgusted with myself. But what haunted me most wasn't what almost happened. It was how badly I had wanted it to. That night, I couldn't sleep. My skin remembered every second, every glance, every word. I kept trying to rewrite the evening in my mind, pretend it was just stress, a weak moment, a shared sadness that went too far. But it wasn't that simple anymore. I'd crossed a threshold, not with my body, but with my heart. A boundary had been broken, not with action, but with intent. And in that moment, I realized something awful. I didn't regret it. Not even a little. Mark returned 2 days earlier than expected. He didn't call ahead. Just walked in like he never left, dropping his suitcase by the door and asking what was for dinner. I froze. Ethan stood still too, his back turned, shoulders rigid. The air shifted instantly. All the silence, the tension, the weight of what hadn't happened, but nearly had, came rushing back. Mark didn't notice, or pretended not to. He was cheerful, distracted, scrolling through his phone, complaining about a delayed flight and bad hotel food. He didn't ask how we were.
Didn't sense anything.
But Ethan and I couldn't even look at each other. Every movement felt rehearsed. Every word felt forced. I thought maybe time would dilute what had passed between us. But it didn't. It only buried it beneath layers of guilt. Ethan became withdrawn. He barely spoke at meals, avoided being alone in the same room as me, and wouldn't hold eye contact. I didn't blame him. I felt just as lost. Then one morning, a plain white envelope showed up in the mailbox. No return address. No handwriting. Inside was a single typed sentence. I know what you did. My chest tightened. I scanned the street. No one. I closed the door slowly, heart pounding, pulse ringing in my ears. I didn't show it to Mark. I didn't even hint at it. I burned the paper in the sink. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Someone had seen, or suspected, or guessed. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe someone overheard something. Or maybe, worse, it was Ethan. I couldn't be sure. That night, I knocked on Ethan's door. He didn't answer at first. When he finally did, his face said everything. He looked like someone carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. I asked if he sent the letter. He didn't deny it. He just said, I needed you to stop pretending. He was right. I had pretended too long. Pretended I was just a lonely wife, that my choices were just reactions to someone else's neglect. But the truth was more brutal. I let it happen. I let myself blur a line that should have never moved. Mark never found out, not really. He resumed his usual rhythm. Travel, texts, distance. The marriage limped forward, hollow and functional. I stayed quiet. Not for his sake, but because I couldn't bring myself to explain something I still couldn't fully understand. Ethan eventually left for college. He hugged me at the door, held on a moment longer than necessary. We never spoke of it again. Not a single word. But I think we both knew it would follow us. Not as a memory, but as a silence we'd carry forever. What happened, or nearly happened, never felt like love. It felt like something more dangerous, a need so deep it confused itself for affection. And when love gets replaced by need, lines break. Morality bends. And people do things they can't undo. Some affairs destroy marriages. Others never make it that far. But the betrayal, the real betrayal, starts the moment you seek from someone what you stopped asking from the one you promised everything to.